It's optimized. Fantastic. So let's talk about moving beyond doom and gloom, because sitting in doom and gloom just feels really awful, right? And how do we get to solutions, or at least reductions in the worst impacts of climate change? So I come to you as a professor of renewable energy technology, energy management, and sustainable development. And as you can see, I've taught a lot of courses in this area, including corporate and campus sustainability. And then also I am president of a nonprofit called the U.S. Partnership for Education for Sustainable Development. You'll hear more about that in a little bit. Let's get this to move. There we go. So what are the outcomes that you'll get if you actually use the material that's in here? I think you'll feel more engaged and inspired. I think you'll feel more empowered to help solve societal problems. You'll have less frustration, worry, and cynicism, because sitting in frustration and worry and cynicism actually feels awful, and it's a waste of time. If during that same time you could be part of the solution building. You'll also feel a stronger democracy that you're contributing to. You'll also be contributing to a healthier economy, a healthier environment, and of course, less disruptive climate change. This also builds skills for citizenship. You know, we are a democracy, but it only works if we engage with it beyond just voting. And the skills we found it takes to do this stuff also helps with employment. So first, let's back up a bit. What is climate change? So if you look on this slide, you've got the sun, and the sun is always providing radiation to the earth when it's within when we can see it, even on cloudy days. And some of that sunlight that hits the earth is reflected back into space, while the rest stays within our atmosphere and our lands and becomes heat. Well, when we have greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, that prevents some of that heat from escaping into space, and it ends up disrupting the climate and warming the planet. I can give you a much simpler thing. You know, when you get into a car that's got dark upholstery and it's cold outside and it's sunny, and you notice when you get into the car that the upholstery is warm, that's because the upholstery, the dark upholstery, absorbs the sun's rays, changes it from shortwave light radiation into longer wave heat radiation, infrared heat. And infrared heat wavelengths are more difficult to get out through the glass of the windows in the windshield of the car. So that's how greenhouse gases act, is they act like that glass in your car, keeping in more of the sun's energy on Earth, and it can become disruptive. So 31 top scientific societies spoke out. This is actually from 2016 in one voice on global climate change, saying that human activities are the primary driver. And yet, while deforestation is an issue, this is really about the burning of fossil fuels. Fossil fuels emit greenhouse gases at a level that we have not seen in at least the past 1 million years. And that's causing more heat to be kept within our atmosphere and disrupting the climate. So we know that individual change is not enough. We know that climate change solutions require policy changes to shift society in all countries to green energy, less greenhouse gas emissions. We know that students and the public can help and need to help to make these policy shifts. Look, our policies for the last 200 years have been to support a fossil fuel-based world. So I know there was some talk about the Union of Concerned Scientists, so I brought up, these are direct quotes from their climate page, and you've got the link to it there. As the amount of carbon dioxide, which is only one of the many greenhouse gases, but it's a main one and it comes from burning fossil fuels. As it increases, the planet warms up, sea levels rise, extreme weather becomes commonplace. A whole range of impacts from wildfires to flooding to extreme heat and drought become more likely. We've seen those this year, and more severe. If we do nothing, the impacts will worsen. Large swaths of the world's population will likely migrate. Entire island nations may disappear. Let me say something about that. I gave the first keynote speech for the Sustainable Islands solutions network for sustainable development. And so I've kept in touch with them, and we have island states that are disappearing now. The magnitude and range of impacts means that almost every human being on Earth will be affected if they're not already. A study just came out last week showing 80% of the world's population has already been affected. Low-income communities and people of color will be hit the hardest, but change is possible. Science does suggest that we can avoid the worst impacts of climate change if we limit warming to under 2 degrees Celsius. Be great if we could get to 1.5 degrees, but that's a long science conversation I'm not going to have today. So to do so, we need a much cleaner economy by mid-century or sooner. Fossil fuel companies need to stop preventing climate action, and leaders in the United States need to act. And you can help. So there's the link to the Union of Concerned Scientists website that tells you what you can do, and it's going to reflect what else I tell you today. This is a larger international trend, education and actions for sustainable development. And the definition of that is to enable people to develop the knowledge and skills to participate in decisions that will improve the quality of life now without damaging the planet for the future. My national nonprofit that I'm president of was started in 2003 to show what was going on in the United States as we had an international decade of education for sustainable development. The skills that you build, many of you already have these skills, right? What I'm going to ask you to do today is not outside of what you can already do. But those skills also are the skills employers value. So when we teach students this, it also helps them with their careers. What do we want for learning outcomes and education for sustainable development? You've got to be able to envision positive possibilities for the future. And we are surrounded by negative scenarios for the future. You know, Dennis and I taught, my partner and I taught for over 7 years an interdisciplinary course where students envisioned positive scenarios for the future. And we did research on what the outcomes were for that. Students went on to be change makers. They stayed longer in higher ed to complete their degrees. They said, nobody's asked me to be a part of helping to create a better future before. I got that particularly from the Black males who were attending from Detroit. And so they said, yes, I want to stay in this course and I want to continue my education so that I can be a part of this. So all of us need to be able to envision positive possibilities for the future. And there are a lot of them. Glad to have that conversation in more depth with you at another time. We also need systems thinking to find the leverage points for societal change. We also need to do our own problem solving with civic engagement, being active in our democracy, talking to our policymakers. We elect them, they work for us, you know. On a personal level, oh yes, you can reduce climate change via caulking and weather stripping. Caulking and weather stripping is really important. It always pays for itself in less than a year. Set back temperatures on your thermostat, food choices, eat less energy intensive foods like industry-based meat. And then you can install solar. I have a solar home. It works on a passive solar, but I also have had solar PV systems that I put up all over this area that we can talk about. And then also switch to electric appliances, heating and cooling in cars and trucks as our utilities move towards more renewable energies, clean energies on the grid. So look, everything we do is in the context of our ecosystems, everything. And you just used a free resource, right? You breathed the air. Sometime today you drank something with water in it. Those are life-sustaining gifts our ecosystems give every day, and we have not factored those into our economic system. So if we're going to have sustainable communities, if we're going to have sustainable economies, we have to fully factor in the need to have these life-sustaining gifts. Did you know that we do not have any tax on greenhouse gases right now? There is not a structured incentive to reduce climate change in our policies right now. That's like trying to get the lead out of the pipes without regulating against lead in the pipes. So in order to get to sustainable communities and sustainable economies, yes, we need to make private choices, and we do. You know, we all try to conserve and pollute less. But what's really important are these public choices, the policies we make, because they will cause the system shift that we need. And we have the knowledge, we have the skills to do that. So here are some solutions that already exist. And I could do a whole speech on just the solutions that already exist. We have the technology to supply 80% of the electricity needs of the US with renewables and energy efficiency. That's from one of our government labs, that analysis, which matches a bunch of others. That's 2012, that fact. We have enough offshore wind potential to meet 200% of our electrical needs in this country. And yes, you can talk about intermittency and you can talk about how it's not in the local place you need it, but read about wheeling, read about how we can move electricity from one place to the other. And I'm a co-principal investigator on a grant from the University of Michigan about the batteries. We can have those wonderful conversations too as storage ramps up. Look, we can ramp up to 100% of our electricity needs from energy efficiency and renewable energies instead of what we've got today, which is just like 15%. It's a little higher than that, I think, right now. We already have the technologies that pay for themselves. You know, have you heard a program called Pay As You Save, where you just pay out of your savings? There's wonderful ways so that this becomes accessible to all and even provide lower costs. So if you read articles that say, oh, this is going to cost more, renewables are lower cost than natural gas and then coal. And that is about some vested interests spreading misinformation. I could tell you more about that too. Actually, they've been called into Congress for hearings on their misinformation. The good news is our state is making a big move to use clean energy and electricity for transportation. Some of you know that Mary Barra, who's the head of GM, her daughter and my granddaughter played soccer together, and we used to have talks on the bleachers. And her commitment isn't just business, it's personal. People taking bold steps. So if you want to understand the pathway that does exist, here's one of many reports that I can give you. The International Energy Agency is a fairly conservative organization, and they wrote this. How do we get to net zero by 2050? But we've got to move. We can no longer procrastinate. We've got to act as if we are in crisis and not just sit around and worry. So this is just a little bit about the U.S. partnership. The U.S. Partnership for Education for Sustainable Development. Hold on, I want to make sure that I end on time for you guys, right? Okay, all right. So I'm just aware of what time it is and how much time I need. Thank you for letting me figure that out. Okay, so we have all sorts of sectors. We have 360 partner organizations, but it's not about the U.S. partnership. What this is about is the progress that's happening in all sectors. And if you could have been in the meetings with me, with the nonprofits and the mayors across this country, and now we have meetings across the world with mayors. I just had one last week with the race to net zero that we're getting from businesses, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, even the evangelicals and the faith-based organizations, not all of them, but over 50% of them have initiatives on this, on higher ed campuses across the country. And then the youth. You know, I help to mentor an international student-led group called Change the Chamber Lobby for Climate. And working with the youth is very exciting as they see what the positive possibilities are and work on it. So I don't have time to share all the great efforts that are going on. I didn't even talk about all the sectors, but we aren't doing enough and we do need to do more. So here's just a taste from the Higher Ed Network real quick, and I'm going to go through this very quickly. You can look at the slides later. We'll make sure the link to the slides are in the chat. So we have 2 national networks that I run out of the U.S. partnership with others. These are 60 mainstream national higher ed associations, all working on including climate solutions in what they teach. You can go to the links, you'll see resources. We have another network made up of college presidents. There's over 1,000 college presidents who have committed to do work on this in the US, but also internationally, there are more. The chief academic officers, student life, the facilities people, there's just so many that are working on this. Sustainable purchasing. So we've all created in these networks an initiative called Beyond Doom and Gloom, engage students in solutions to climate change. And I want to share some of those with you now. Look, we can't prevent climate change. It's already baked in. It's just a question of how bad it's going to be. Why is policy advocacy needed? Well, because educators asked for it. They said we weren't trained in this. And we know that policy is important for systemic change. Practitioners, I ran the Detroit Green Skills Alliance, and the people who own the solar companies and the energy management companies came and said, Deb, we're trying to run a business and implement these solutions. We don't have time to go to Lansing and educate these policymakers alone. We need more people on board. And the policymakers said to me, hey, you know, the fossil fuel companies are the ones that show up all the time. So if you want to shift to a clean energy transition that will reduce the worst impacts of climate change, you got to get other people to come and show up. And in fact, Terry Gannon taught me through the Sierra Club about how easy it is to advocate. And I encourage you to work with local environmental groups and talk to us who have. It's fun. Your youth did through the club. So there's lots of bad news, and you can sit and be sad about the ecosystem disruption and the sea level rise and the human suffering and the death. You can sit in grief if you want, but if you do, you'll tend to feel frustrated, worried, and confused. You'll tend to feel disempowered with that feeling, I can't do anything. And you can become an early cynic where you shut down. It's hard to be open-hearted and loving when you're feeling these other things. And of course, we are a loving community. Often the opportunities people see are just too limited. I can only do this, like individual choices of more sustainable living, or protesting, or going to events and carrying signs. These are all important, and they aren't enough. So here's what you can do. You can be a climate hero by just making a few phone calls. We have a script for you. You can pick what resonates with you. We'll tell you who. The youth in our Change the Chamber group have had meetings with over 60 US senators and US House of Representatives over the last 2.5 months. We have kept in touch with allies in nonprofits and in senators' offices. We know who needs to be convinced to get these policies. And we've set that up for you. So I'm concerned that we may run out of time. So I'm not going to show this video, but this video is great. I encourage you to see it. It's very inspiring. It's about how when you do that, it can make a difference. Let me get through the rest, and maybe if there's time, I'll show it.
Yeah.
Some phrases are designed for inclusion in that video. You'll hear something about freedom. It's important to include people across the political spectrum. People who don't necessarily care about climate can still care about the clean energy transition and reducing human suffering. And if you go to that site that's on that last piece of this slide here, you'll learn more about that. So who supports these solutions? Well, climate scientists support the solutions. Nobel Prize winning economists, business leaders, lots of environmental groups, so many experts. And of course, our youth. This is our youth energy solution that we started years ago. What can we do at CUUB? Well, call your elected representatives, ask for comprehensive action on climate solutions now. And that's the link again. I'll put that in the chat specifically when we get done here. And then if you want to do even more, you can go to this website about it and build bridges with our neighbors across the political divide. You've heard me talk about before about community energy conversations. We could do that at CUUB. It would make a difference, particularly here in Livingston County. Let's stop being afraid of talking to others. And you don't want to pick the extremists, but there's lots of groups we could be interacting with and finding that common ground. And then also go see the progress at the Sustainable Development Goals website, 17 goals to make the world a better place. The key ideas, and I'm almost done. You can make a difference. Systemic change is needed. 3 of my students called one senator and changed his vote on a key piece of legislation. Your calls matter. And let me highlight that Representative Slotkin has not yet decided whether to support the budget reconciliation bill. That is the first bill that has quality and bold climate solutions in it for decades. So please call Representative Slotkin and support her. Say, please support the climate policies and budget reconciliation. Vote for that bill. She needs to hear from you. I've called her 3 times already, including her climate expert, and I can tell you those calls will matter. Also, your pollution matters. Here's some links where you can fix your home, and you can do it with financing to make it affordable. And I'm 1 minute over. So in that, let me take 1 more minute. Here's resources for kids. We haven't talked about adaptation. That's another presentation I'd like to give. It's important to have a system so that those who might die from heat waves have a way of being saved. We've done it. We're doing it in Detroit. You need to hear about those solutions. You need to hear about appropriate technology, the wonderful role technology can play in adaptation. And take a look at the global guidance document I wrote, co-authored with the United Nations Environment Program, on how we create a green and inclusive workforce. I think you'll enjoy that. Are you only going to do 3 things from today? Go to Be a Climate Hero, make those calls. You can sign up for the newsletter while you're there. Fix your home with Michigan Saves. It's a great program that helps you make it affordable too. And get involved in upcoming elections. We've got to vote out the climate deniers at the state and federal levels. Be persistent. What you do matters. And use self-care. Cope well with Joanna Macy. She's got a lot of great materials on it. There are groups in Ann Arbor in this area on it. We're a young species, humans. We're making mistakes. We're either in the toddler or adolescent stage. You wouldn't give up on your toddler or your adolescent, would you? So don't give up on us. And then feel better as you act to reduce the worst impacts of climate instability. Every week we do not act on this, we are increasing human suffering. So do something each week. You can enjoy the actions too. Look what my youth did. They're putting out ads, getting Walmart to come out in support of these climate bills, getting Disney to come out in support of these climate bills. And the companies reach out to us. We have meetings. We're helping a home improvement company now make it so it's easy for people to do it across the country in terms of reducing their greenhouse gas pollution. So it takes a little effort, but the impacts are powerful and positive and within your skill set. Reduce your despair and worry, help move us to solutions. And all my slides are here. So afterwards we can have questions and answers if you want. Thank you.
What did it say? I